Breakfast to me is a very important meal. The reason why is that the day for a neurosurgeon is very fluid.
I've been to Ecuador for about 10 years with this church from Cary, doing general medical work, and I'd always wanted to do a neurosurgery trip. And this pastor from Uganda, who has a church of 50,000 people, shows up on our doorstep, and while we were praying for him, said, "Mike, you're going to go to Uganda."
You never know what is going to happen when you start working. It's very common for me to get home at 10 o'clock. It's very common for me not to have lunch. In Uganda, we don't have breaks. If you have a break, then getting the momentum again is extremely hard. So I make it a point to have something in my tummy, and hence a very big breakfast.
I said, "Well, it's very nice, Pastor Jackson, but I go to Ecuador, so I won't be going to Uganda." Because he basically said he thought he heard a word from the Lord I was going to Uganda, so I felt it was my responsibility to pray about it. And then I kind of did this Gideon thing, where Gideon in the Bible, you know, he's supposed to fight 10,000 or 30,000 men with only 300. And when he does that, he says, "Lord, if this is really you, then I want to wake up in the morning and there'll be dew on the ground but not on my fleece." And so he wakes up the next morning and there's dew on the ground but there's not dew on the fleece. And you'd think that would be enough, but he goes, "No, okay, can you turn it around now? Now let dew be on the fleece but not on the ground tomorrow morning." And that's what happens. And I kind of did a similar thing with Ecuador. I was going to Ecuador the next month, like I always go every summer. And it was in July, and we went. And I kind of prayed, "Lord, if you really show me that I'm done here in Ecuador, then I'll be done. But you got to show me that I'm done."
I was born in Mulago, and I actually grew up in Mulago. Be taken for ward rounds. Especially when mom was busy, no one was there to mind me at home. I was bundled up and became a neurosurgeon. So medicine was really a part and parcel of my growing up. My dad was a neurosurgeon, my mom is a midwife. So there was a lot of medicine in the family.
And I kind of did a similar thing with Ecuador. I was going to Ecuador the next month, like I always go every summer. And it was in July, and we went. And I kind of prayed, "Lord, if you really show me that I'm done here in Ecuador, then I'll be done. But you got to show me that I'm done." So of course we miss our plane flight from Raleigh to Miami. So we miss our flight from Miami to Ecuador. So we arrive a day late. On to 1 Ecuador, nothing. On Wednesday we went to see if we could take care of these women and their children in prison here. So we went there, and then of course our car breaks down on the way home. And so for 2 miles of pushing the car through the streets of Guayaquil, okay, it's clearly Uganda 2, Ecuador 1. I told my wife, I said, "Chris, I really feel God has called me, and now I've asked him to show me for sure, and he's clearly shown me, so I want to go to Uganda."
I did my initial training in Mulago, so my undergraduate degree. I then did 3 years of general surgery and 4 years of neuro in Australia. I came back in 2006. Mulago hadn't changed at all. It really hadn't changed from what it was in the 1970s, early 1970s. So there was a big difference between what I had learned in Australia and what was going on in Mulago. What would be a standard 1.5 to 2 hour operation for, let's say, meningioma, which is sitting in a fairly comfortable place, no intricacies to it, could take us even 4 or 5 hours. The monitoring was done by looking at the patient and the judgment of the anesthetist as to whether the oxygenation was good or not. The pulse was done by feeling the pulse. So if the blood pressure is low, it becomes difficult to get a good feel of what the pulse actually is. The blood pressure had to be done manually, and if you imagine 5 hours of manual pumping, it just doesn't do it. So you find very good blood pressures at the beginning of the case, and a few in between, and then maybe towards the end when they know that they're about to finish, then they get back to it. So there was hardly any monitoring at all. They have power drills which were sharp, so they would actually cut through the bone, not like cut, it would actually work. And that compared with the hand-done twist drills, which they call the Hudson brace. It would take you maybe a minute or so to make a hole in the bone. While with the Hudson brace, you're talking about 10 minutes, of hard manual work, because it is your strength which actually gets through the bone. And ours were old, so that really meant your strength had to do it. In January 2007, Professor Hageland then came and visited us.
It was amazing how unbelievably poor they were. It was a 1,500-bed hospital, which is bigger than Duke Hospital, and it only had one ventilator. A photo I took of this gentleman who was on the ventilator who had a head injury, and I thought this is a great photo. I can show the one ventilator and a head injury patient that was operated on by the neurosurgeons, and they had saved his life actually with the minimal equipment they had. And I came back the next morning and he was gone. And I asked Dr. Joel, I said, "Hey Joel, what happened to the guy in that bed?" And he said, "Oh, we had a little problem last night." I said, "What do you mean a little problem?" He goes, "Oh, we had a problem." I go, "Joel, the guy's gone. Where is he?" He goes, "Well, he's dead." I go, "How did he die? You guys saved his life." He goes, "Well, the power went out last night, and when the generators kicked on, which they did right away, the nurses didn't notice because we have no monitors, that the ventilator reset to 0. And 20 minutes later he was brain dead, so we had to let him go." I had a little list of what the Hagelin vision for Uganda was, and it was like 1 or 2 ventilators, a bipolar to coagulate the blood vessels, a drill for sure, and then a power cord to hook it all up so it would all run. So that was about all I had as an idea for what I was going to do.
When he left, we thought that that was it. It was not the first person who had come to the unit and talked to us and saw our plight and left. But that was the beginning of the partnership with you.
I went to the OR, and I've been talking about my Ecuador missions trips for 10 years, and nobody had ever volunteered to go. They said, "Lord, if this is really you again, I need some really good team to go to Uganda."
Dr. Hagelin approached me one day as we were doing a procedure in the operating room and asked if I would be interested in going, and immediately I was struck with the idea, well, it's quite an honor to be asked to be part of a small team.
By the time the day was over, 18 people had volunteered to go. So I thought, wow, this is awesome. So I started torturing people around Duke, like, where is our surplus equipment? I said, well, we have a surplus store. I called this Dumpster Diving 101 because it was just this huge warehouse with all the stuff. It looked like something out of the Raiders of the Lost Ark with all this relic equipment. But I started digging around there, and I even found my old bipolar that I used to use at Duke when I first got there, but we got the newer version, so it went off to the surplus store, and it had probably been sitting there for 4 or 5 years, but turned it on and it still worked great. So we set up this thing called Duke Global Health Plus. The plus stands for Placement of Life-Giving Usable Surplus. What it meant was rather than stuff going to a surplus store, we would keep it all, and we would be able to use it for faculty projects overseas. And when we made up the application form, yes, at midnight that night, they got the first application from me. All of a sudden we got a couple anesthesia machines. They're these 400-pound machines, but they do the anesthesia in the OR at Duke. It was a huge shipment. We put it on British Air, and for $57,000 we flew it over to Uganda so it would land there when we were there. So we're going to come over and try to help Malago Hospital. I got like this standing ovation and I started crying, but I mean, it was just amazing to see, how much the people were thankful for doing anything. So doing anything gets that kind of response. I can't imagine what's going to happen when we get over there with all the things we're going to do now, which is just 100,000 times bigger than what I was planning on doing when I originally went over there in January of this year.